Hello, everybody. Today is November 10th, 2023. My name is Nico Moran. Welcome to another Swan Bitcoin live stream. Today, I'm joined with Jan Pritzker, who is the co-founder and CTO of Swan Bitcoin. And we were also joined by Jason Brett, who is the former FDIC capital markets regulator during the 2008-2009 global financial crisis. He's currently working on creating a new regulatory paradigm for digital assets. Jason is based out of Washington, D.C. Today, we're going to talk about what you can do today to protect your rights as a Bitcoiner in the United States. We must hold the line here because when regulations go into effect, it's already too late. Before we get started, I want to give a quick rundown of the series of events as they've happened over the last couple of weeks. So let's start off with the infamous Wall Street Journal article that was released. The title of the article is Hamas Militants Behind Israel Attack Raised Millions of Dollars in Crypto. That led to a letter, or that was used, better said, by Elizabeth Warren and other members of government to write a letter to the White House and also the U.S. Treasury. That put pressure on the U.S. Treasury and the FinCEN to propose these crazy power grabbing regulations. There's this great article by Bitcoin Magazine that breaks down the details of some of these proposed regulations by the FinCEN. So first, it starts off with, these are quoted directly from the proposal: pooling or aggregating funds from multiple persons' wallets, addresses, or accounts. Shinobi points out, this encompasses so many different activities other than a traditional custodial mixing service, Lightning channels. This is multiple persons pooling and aggregating funds together. Multi-sig wallets held by multiple people in general are doing the same thing. Just combining a recent withdrawal from Coinbase with coins you had from Kraken from the point of view of both exchanges is pooling funds from multiple addresses. Second example, using programmatic or algorithmic code to coordinate, manage, or manipulate the structure of a transaction. Again, that completely covers the Lightning Network. Coin joins fall into this definition. In fact, know what? This is so ridiculous and absurdly broad, it doesn't even specify manipulating the structure of a transaction to obtain obfuscation of the source of funds. The third one, splitting funds for transmittal and transferring the funds through a series of independent transactions. This is also incredibly broad. How are legitimate independent transactions between the same parties to be distinguished from a single transaction split into many for obfuscation purposes? What about situations where that is a perfectly legitimate thing to do for no reason other than your personal privacy? What if I only had 3 different UTXOs that 3 separate people know about, and I don't want to reveal to all 3 of them my payment history with the other 2 in order to make a payment requiring all 3 UTXOs? And I think this personally, number 4, is the most striking, in my opinion. Creating and using single-use wallets, addresses, or accounts, and sending funds through such wallets, addresses, or accounts through a series of independent transactions. Shinobi correctly points out when he says, so the default behavior of the supermajority of Bitcoin wallets, not reusing addresses, constitutes mixing. Shinobi brings up a really, really good point. Now, the problem with this Wall Street Journal article, and this was later discovered as Sam Callahan, who's currently the lead analyst at Swan, is that the Wall Street Journal article got a lot of the information wrong. Sam Callahan perfectly describes it here in this tweet that went absolutely viral on Twitter. He says, last week, the Wall Street Journal published an article claiming about $90 million worth of crypto was used to fund Hamas, a serious claim that gained significant attention. In response to the article, anti-Bitcoin politicians directly linked the Wall Street Journal article as evidence in a letter to the White House and Treasury to, quote, address the serious national security threats posed by crypto's use to finance terrorism. Later, it was confirmed that the article was patently false. It was straight up fake news. This was confirmed by Chainalysis, which ran the numbers. Turns out the authors of the article mistakenly counted an entire exchange's trading volume, $82 million, for a terrorist group's address. Rookie move. The actual funds that went to known terrorist-linked addresses was substantially less. quote, of the roughly $82 million in cryptocurrency received by this address, about $450,000 worth of funds were transferred from the known Terra-affiliated wallet. Given the activity of this address, the person or group of people controlling it likely not the same person that controls the Terra-affiliated wallet, but is rather a service provider that knowingly or unknowingly facilitated the Terra financing activity. So the Wall Street Journal figure for crypto use and financing Hamas was off by over 99%. This was not only pointed out by Sam Callahan. Here is Senator Cynthia Lummis, who is very pro-Bitcoin. She points out an accurate report last week claimed Hamas raised nearly $100 million via crypto assets. In reality, it was less than $500,000. For our audio listeners, here's a graphic that points out that of the total global illicit finance, which is 2.9 trillion, crypto only accounts, according to this graphic, 0.69% of that. But it still seems like they took advantage of this crisis to attempt to impose this crazy regulation. I want to end it with this. This is a piece from Bitcoin Magazine that Preston Pish authored. He goes on to say, America was founded on the principle of individual rights and freedoms. Those freedoms in turn created the strongest economy and the most powerful nation on the planet. It is those very freedoms that are at risk with knee-jerk policy decisions to remove your individual rights in the name of security. In the face of the unstoppable tide that is Bitcoin and decentralized finance, it is paramount that we, as a society, and particularly as citizens of the United States, recognize the critical crossroads we find ourselves. The trajectory of Bitcoin's innovation and adoption will continue with or without the active participation or understanding of any single nation. The question that remains is whether we will be leaders or laggards in this inevitable financial evolution. So this is, I'm not going to lie, the series of events, how they happened over the last 2 weeks, really, I wish I could say they surprised me, but I can definitely say they're quite striking. And the fact that FinCEN has not walked this back, even though it was exposed that article was incorrect, I think speaks volumes. Would that be safe to say? Would that be correct to say, Jason? And then we'll pass it on to Jan. Jason, I think you're muted. So let's go with Jan first.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a power grab, but it's also just extremely misinformed in terms of not just where the facts, came from, which was obviously the facts were wrong and then misinterpreted and then used to enhance, the surveillance arm of the government, which is, by the way, completely unconstitutional, right? I mean, this all goes back to the Bank Secrecy Act and Patriot Act and all this other stuff that essentially turns banks into surveillance mechanisms, right? The Fourth Amendment protects us from unwarranted search and seizure, but the banks are doing exactly that, unwarranted search and seizure. I mean, it's literally that, right? Complete Fourth Amendment violation. Now, the system that's there today is completely ineffective. There was stuff that came out in 2020. If you look at something called the FinCEN files, BuzzFeed was reporting on it, basically reporting on the fact that banks essentially just blast these things left and right. They file suspicious reports simply because they have to defensively. And then, of course, nobody looks at them, right? So it's a completely ineffective system to begin with, A. B, you've got trillions of dollars all going through traditional banking, and now you have this tiny fraction going through these, quote unquote, crypto transactions. I say crypto because that's what they say, but obviously, we care about Bitcoin. We don't care about the crypto garbage that's out there. But the government is looking to essentially expand that surveillance more and more to use this basically fake news to turn it into something that expands the reporting requirements of financial institutions, which creates honeypots of activity for regular citizens. So it's really, really problematic for privacy, and it's not even effective. So I think what we're seeing here is just this giant power grab. Ultimately, what it does is expands the size of government, because the more reports, the more you need FinCEN employees. Great, let's just keep funding that. Let's just keep funding that machine, right? Even if it's doing absolutely nothing useful.
100%. And again, the point here is the fact that they use a tragedy that is happening currently in Palestine and Israel really to justify this power grab, right? The way that you said it. So Jason, from your perspective, you dedicate your life to working in the regulatory field. You are based out of Washington, D.C. Did this surprise you when the series of events happened?
First of all, thanks for having me on, and Jan, good to see you. Nico, it's ironic. I actually have to hop in about 3 minutes for another show where they want to talk to me on the radio about Jan's tweet and what he's trying to do with FinCEN. So I might have to try to exit and then come back. But this is
We'll attack on both fronts.
Yeah, but what I think is important is to remember that like we're a we're a republic, right? We're not pure democracy, but we're a republic, and so we entrust some of the folks on both the executive side as well as on the legislative side to do the right thing for us. And when you have a certain amount of power, what's the expression? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. We've allowed in our Constitution in this country the ability, based off of not complete information, to react. And that's what's really sad about this is like they're reacting to the financial, lines of credit and all the financial networks, but at the same time, they're not even thinking about the fact that like nothing tragic happened from quote unquote crypto, right? And so, what bothers me, full stop, before we even get to the importance of the comments, the importance of what Jan is doing, is that we're talking about using the Patriot Act to make policy across the most important and largest digital asset of them all, that has, in other words, the one that matters, and they just don't call it Bitcoin enough in the government, even though they should. And that's really where you're at, I think, is facing this concept of we haven't even had the tragedy. We haven't proven yet that this happened through this kind of money. And yet here we are saying this is the way we're going to go forward. This is our new like TSA in the crypto world kind of scans.
Jason, would it be safe to say that they took advantage of a tragedy to circumvent the legislative process in an attempted power grab?
I would say that, like all good secretaries of the Treasury, you never let a good crisis go to waste. And when your back's against the wall, as it was for her, because remember, over 100 congressmen were banging at her door, telling her she had to do something about this. To me, this is what I think you should remember is, this is the area that's been picked because there isn't policy people in DC the way there are crypto people fighting every day for why crypto should exist, right? And why tokens should exist. There's no one here saying why this is an important subject, why you can't just ban this whole class or make it also, it has to all record KYC. So it's a knee-jerk reaction. It's definitely a power grab. And I think in their minds, they have it kind of like checkmate, because remember, Tornado Cash got sanctioned, and then the U.S. government won in court. So I think that's the other part of the reason why they're laying it out in this fashion.
Gotcha. Well, Jason, I do want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. Jan, before we move on to talk about what we can do as individuals, what action we can take, I actually want to play a clip from the Senate Banking Committee where there was expert testimony where they pushed back against the claims that were made by the Wall Street Journal that was used for the White House letter. And also, I think Elizabeth Warren had a Freudian slip where she tried to connect self-custody to crime, which I think was, I can't believe we are at that point. So I'm going to play the clip and then we'll talk about it.
Let's don't lose sight and focus from the big picture. Crypto is currently a very small part of the puzzle. The major funding channels were and remain state funding, Iran and others. Those are the major players. Most of the funds are still being transferred by the traditional channels that we all know from the past. Banks, money transmitter, payment system, hawala, money exchange, trade-based terrorism financing, charity, cash, shell companies, and crypto. The effort should be global and focus on imposing global sanctions on Hamas and their sponsors, as was the case with ISIS.
Last year, you wrote that, quote, in their attempt to avoid being traced, illegal actors have adopted ever more sophisticated cryptocurrency technologies such as non-custodial wallets.
That's a very strong statement, isn't it, Jan?
Yeah, I don't think that was a Freudian slip. I think that's pretty intentional. I mean, they have used the words unhosted, self-custodial, like unhosted especially is like really this kind of toxic newspeak, right? Because it's telling you that the hosted thing is the correct thing and the unhosted one is you have to watch out for because it's un something, right? It's a very specific linguistic choice because they could have gone to that, model of, okay, it's a third-party wallet or it's your own wallet, right? No, but it's unhosted, which is just languages prevailing across all kinds of regulations right now. And yes, it's very dangerous. And I want to take a step back for a second, though, because yes, what she said is right. The majority of terrorist financing is obviously fiat. It's also kind of obvious if you think about it. Crypto, even in general, is very, very new. It's a very small portion of what anybody does in financial flows in general. But there's stats to show, how much of that terrorist financing is going on. You had the chart up $20+ trillion or whatever it was, or $2 trillion. It's crazy, right? And it's all done through major banks, and we have major banks constantly paying fines and admitting fault. Yeah, 2.9 trillion. Thank you. Obviously, Bitcoin is a tiny, tiny fraction of that. So while I think it's an important time for us as Bitcoiners to come together, call to arms, let's try to fight this expansion of surveillance. We have to remember that the surveillance itself started with the Bank Secrecy Act, got worse with the Patriot Act. That surveillance itself, even on traditional cash and traditional digital dollars, is ineffective. I mean, look at the stats. There's $3 trillion worth of crime going on in the banking system. They can't stop that. They think they're going to be able to stop it with crypto. I mean, it's game over. Like, they are not doing an effective job on that side. So why should we trust them at all, right? Why should we allow them to violate our rights, to create honeypots, which then, demonstrably get exploited, right? We've had numerous financial institutions lose data on people in the last, 5 years even. Experian, Capital One, there's all these banking institutions that hundreds of millions of people's data has been leaked because of these programs that the government imposes. And then when you look at what they do with this stuff, I mean, what do they do with all these reports that are being filed? Nothing. They can't. The volume is ridiculous because banks are just going to be filing every possible transaction. So what this legislation is doing, it's completely misguided. It's actually going to make the problem worse for them because by classifying, every single thing you can do in Bitcoin essentially as a reportable transaction, okay, I mean, financial institutions are going to literally report every single transaction. First of all, you've got the blockchain. It's got all the transactions there, so you don't need to report anything. They're right there, right? But yeah, I mean, the offices are going to be overwhelmed with the number of reports. They're already overwhelmed simply because of inflation. They have reporting thresholds that are dollar-based, and as the dollar debases, you've got to report more and more transactions. So we've seen, the number of transactions being reported over the last couple of years increasing 20% year over year the last 2 years. I mean, it's already a ridiculously dysfunctional system. So they're doing all this theater. It's privacy violation theater. Well, it's a security theater. It actually is privacy violating, right? The privacy violations are real. The hacks are real. We're going to get our data stolen. But on the flip side of that, the security side, that's security theater. They're not actually stopping any of this crime. They're not actually tracking anything. They can't possibly process these reports. So I would take a step back and say, yes, we should fight it as Bitcoiners because it's Bitcoin specific. But more importantly, we need to go to the root cause. Patriot Act is unconstitutional. The BSA is unconstitutional. We need to roll all of that back. And I think we need to really make it clear that these things are not working.
100%. And I just want to mention something about the Bank Secrecy Act, which was implemented in 1970. That threshold was $10,000 to report. If you adjust for inflation, that would be the equivalent of $79,000 today. Mm-hmm. And of course, that number stayed exactly the same, right? So yeah,
that's, by the way, that's for cash transactions, and the reporting for money services businesses that are doing digital transactions or any sort of transaction is actually $2,000 at today's $2,000. Which is basically everything, right? Like every single transaction is being reported. So that's what we're talking about here, is that inflation simply, like you said, went from 10,000 to 80,000. It's an 8x increase in surveillance simply from inflation.
100%.
It's just completely mind-boggling.
100%. So let's talk about what we can do as individuals for this specific issue, right? Which is the FinCEN proposal that was proposed based on a fake article. I think it's safe to say that now, that was released by the Wall Street Journal. So this went viral Yan, and you did a great job because this garnered a lot of attention. So there is something that we can do as individuals and as Bitcoiners. So if you are watching the live stream right now, if you check the video description, there is a link to Jan's tweet, and there is also a link directly to go to the Federal Registrar where you can make a comment. So let me read Jan's tweet, and then we'll go from there. So Jan said, action required. FinCEN has a proposed rule that tramples our First and Fourth Amendment liberties, continuing the expansion of unwarranted search and seizure on law-abiding Americans. You can comment in less than 5 minutes with 3 easy steps. Source a list of objections. Here's a nice list of bullets. Or look at the bottom of this post for my full text, which was generated from my own bullet points using OpenAI. Go to chat.openai.com, paste your bullets, alter them as you wish, add the prompt at the top, reformat the following in a voice appropriate for submission as a FinCEN proposed rulemaking comment. Go here to comment and paste your letter. So you have absolutely no excuse. Jan made it incredibly easy for you. If you are a Bitcoiner in the United States, I highly, highly recommend you do this. We're almost at 1,000 comments. I think last time I checked, if I could find it, we were at 900 something. So we should definitely get to 1,000 comments. I don't think that's a huge ask from everybody. And Jan couldn't have made it easier for you if you follow these very, very simple but efficient steps. So yeah, Jan, I mean, were you surprised that it got so much attention?
Yeah, a little bit actually. I didn't think it was going to get to 1,000, but I set that goal right away, and I said let's get to 1,000. I thought we were going to get there quicker after seeing the initial traction, because we got to I think 300 or 400 in the first day, and then it started tapering off. But we've been pressing on forward, and we're doing a good job, guys. I mean, we just got to get it to 1,000. I think that's just kind of a baseline mark. If we can go to 10,000, great. But 1,000 shows the government that there is a constituency here that cares. I don't expect that they're going to actually do anything about these comments, right? I'm not naive. I don't think anybody actually reads them, but I think the fact that the volume is there, you just heard Jason's been invited onto a radio show to talk about it. So if that volume wasn't there, there would be no invite to the radio show. These issues would not be popping up. And I think, the best we can do is create noise. We can create noise, we can create conversation, we can create awareness that these are badly engineered laws. Not only are they not serving, the needs of the government, actually, if you look at it, the efficiency, the effectiveness is not there, but they're completely exposing Americans to privacy violations, to hacks, things like that, which we really don't want. And we also want the ability to use money freely. I think the free speech aspect of money is extremely critical. It's part of why America works, is because you have free speech, you have the First Amendment, and money is speech. These things are really, really important. If you break that stuff, you're breaking society. And I think we're going in a really bad direction here, guys. I mean, I'm from the former Soviet Union. We're not there yet, but we're headed in that direction if we continue to impose restrictions on speech, and restrictions on money are restrictions on speech. And if they tell you that you can't spend your Bitcoin unless you dox your entire UTXO, what they're telling you to do is write your entire balance when you go into and spending your money. It's like writing your entire bank balance and your dollar bill and handing it to the merchant. It makes no sense, right? So we need to get away from this concept that privacy is something special, or that only some people do it, or that it's nefarious. It's a default feature. Like transacting on the Lightning Network is not a crime. Publishing bits of text on the internet is not a crime. And if we let them make that a crime, make that something that we have to report on, and somebody's got to monitor it, like we've lost that game, right? So we need to protect our society. It's really important that everybody goes out there and talks about this stuff. Again, don't care if it makes a dent in a specific issue. I fully expect, by the way, that this FinCEN rule will still pass, and that all this sort of regulation is going to come down, and we're going to have a lot of fighting in front of us. But if we can create a lot of noise today, we will at least be in the media. It'll get talked about, and that's the beginning, right? That's all you could do from that side. Otherwise, just build better tooling and make the laws very difficult to enforce. I think that's also very important.
100%, 100%. And I just want to say, guys, take action, take agency, get involved, color within the lines. Jan's made it incredibly easy for you guys. Check out the link in the video description. It will take you to Jan's tweet. It's a quick tutorial telling you what to do exactly word for word. You can use AI to make the process even easier. And then the link to the Federal Registry is there where you can leave your comment. Now, to wrap up the live stream, I do want to end it with reading a passage, which I think is very, very appropriate from Corey's piece, The Race to Avoid the War. Corey goes on to say, we Bitcoiners are in a race, perhaps the most important race we will ever run. We are racing against time to drive the adoption of Bitcoin as fast as we can. We are racing towards a future in which the US government never coordinates a concerted attack against Bitcoin and Bitcoiners. This is a race to avoid the war. Although Bitcoin is destined to win, if we lose this race to avoid the war, victory will be far more costly. This would be the long way and the hard way. Instead of a sprint to a bright orange future, we would be embroiled in a long, hard confrontation with a government desperate to hold on to the power of the monetary printing press. If we lose the race, the long, hard path will be war in which hundreds of millions of people will suffer the decivilizing and impoverishing effects of hyperinflation. So for those of us alive, for those of us ready and able now, it is vitally important to run this race as well as possible. Today is a moment to take action. We made it incredibly easy for you guys. Jan, thank you so much for joining us on the live stream today.
Thanks for having me, Nico.
Appreciate it. Guys, don't ask what Bitcoin could do for you. Ask what you can do for Bitcoin. This is Nico Moran, Director of Content Strategy at Swan. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to smash that like button if you enjoy the content. Consider subscribing to the channel, and we will see you on the next live stream. Thank you.